Hi, Sarah. Thanks for taking the time to talk today.
Hi, Peter. It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me to have a conversation.
Okay. Where are you sitting right now?
I'm sitting in a place called Umina, which is on the central coast of New South Wales. So it's about kind of an hour and 20 minutes north of Sydney.
Okay. And what can you see when you look out the window?
Well, it's nighttime here, so
Oh, not much.
not much. It's dark, but if it was daytime, I'd be able to see a creek, but I'd most importantly be able to hear the ocean. So I'm about a 5 minute walk from the ocean. So it's more what I can hear that's important rather than what I see.
Okay. Do you go in the water every day or regularly?
I absolutely do. So I'm a very keen ocean swimmer. So I swim just about every day, unless it's huge swells. Through summer, through winter, I swim every morning with a group of other ocean swimmers, about kind of almost a kilometre offshore from the beach.
Well, so you're on the beach every day.
Yep, I'm absolutely an ocean woman. Always have been. Even as a little girl, I grew up in the Fijian Islands, so I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. I have to be on the coast, on the beach, in the water.
Fantastic. Uh, a sort of related issue is what's going on in Glasgow at the moment, the COP. I was just watching the speech from David Attenborough. You know the speech that he just given?
I haven't seen the full speech, but I did read the headlines of what he said. I'm also an absolute Attenborough fan, and a lot of what I align with, a lot of what I talk about is learnings from him about where we are and the loss of biodiversity and the critical place where we're at. So I haven't seen his full speech, but I'm following what's going on there. I'm very interested in anything to do. I'm interested in conservation as a broad concept, and the environment as a broad concept. They're my greatest values, but particular focus on ocean conservation, and of course the effect that climate change is having on our oceans is significant and substantial.
Sure. So if Attenborough is a an inspiration, if you like,
Yes.
how would you how do you feel when you hear him speak?
Look, the great thing about David Attenborough is that he is incredibly knowledgeable. Um, I love the way that he presents the situation in a very well informed, um, incredibly emotional way, and I think that's what we need to do. And I think he moves us all about, he's a very kind of he's an Englishman. He's quite calm in the way that he presents, but you can tell underneath that is very stirring emotions about what's
Hmm.
taking place, and he is. It's loaded with the anxiety of what we're facing. Pardon me. Um, so I think he's got people listening all the way around the world because he's an expert. Um, it's very loaded with emotion, which it needs to be. But the great thing about Attenborough, and I've got a couple of his books here right by me on the shelf, is that he always does uh, ensure that there's that message of hope in his storytelling. Um, and that hope is based on, like, this is a situation, it's really bad, it's critical, but there is a chance to reverse it. And these are the things that we can do. And I think in everything that I do, in my filmmaking and in the organisation Take3 that I work with, it's imperative to lift up from that and present hope, present solutions, present actions that all of us can do to kind of rise from the ashes. And that's what I love about him as a storyteller. It's like, here, because I'm an expert, this is what I've seen. But if you do something now, we can fix this problem, and that's super important.
I love that. I love that that hope and action,
Mm.
and that takes us to your organization, Take3 for the Sea. That is a action orientated title. what does Take3For The Sea do?
Yeah, it certainly is. So, Take3For The Sea has a really simple message, and that is if everybody takes 3 pieces of rubbish when they leave the beach, a waterway, or anywhere, that we're making a difference. And and it sounds pretty simple and all a bit too good to be true. And it is simple, but the strength of Take Three is the simplicity of our message. It's makes it something that everybody can participate in. It makes it achievable, and it's very much like it's all about if one person takes this individual action and shares that story, and then they share that story, and then they do that action and share that story. It's very much about a multiplier and a ripple effect. And Take Three started as an organisation here in Australia about 12 years ago now, very much a grassroots organisation in a small coastal community. But it spread that message far and wide, and it's actually now followed in 129 countries around the world. People are taking
Wow.
three for
Okay.
the sea. So what's the beauty about that is that because it's a simple message, because everybody can engage with it, whether they're an individual, a family, a community, a corporate, a business, kids especially, it allows you to build a movement. But it's also very much a conversation starter. It's about us raising awareness about a problem. This is what you can do about it, but there's many, many other things that you can do, like obviously give up single-use plastics and all of the conversations we're having around that.
That's great. So, very simple message. When you're on the beach, take 3 with you.
Take 3 for the sea. There's a really great, I know people can't see, but it's almost like a boy or girl scout signal. It's holding up 3 fingers. So it's very much about, it's an everyday action that you can take. I think it's a great thing about Take 3. So there's lots of kind of World Cleanup Days and Clean Up Australia Days, which are great and really valid and important. But our message is about something that you can do every day. You can participate in the solution every day. You can share that story every day. And I think a really important message I always like to get across is, and feel good about it. We're living in a world where there's a fair bit of doom and gloom around, and there's a lot of people feeling powerless about what's taking place around them. And I think being able to do something positive every day and feel good about that, whether you're an individual or an organisation, taking positive action is a fantastic way to move forward and feel good about it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we're just at the moment we're sort of living in this feeling of powerlessness, and sort of taking a simple action seems like a great way to break out of that cycle. Now, you've got a lot of things going on besides the Take 3 for the Sea message. You've got, as I understand, CEO cleanups. I've seen that in your social media. Perhaps you could mention what you're doing there.
Sure. So so with Take 3, we have lots of different programs. We have a lot of education programs, and all the way from early childhood through second and primary school up to university students. They used to be face-to-face incursions. Now we've also developed a whole suite of online education programs for obvious reasons. We have lots of youth leadership programs, both youth leadership in terms of around the plastic pollution problem, so raising awareness about the problem and giving young people the skills to run their own projects. And on that note, we're really passionate about youth leadership, and that's because it's not just that they are the future caretakers of our planet, and we need to skill up and give opportunity to young people to drive change themselves. But we're also really passionate about listening to young people and what they've got to say. So, we acknowledge that there's a lot of young people in the world that are really unhappy about the decisions that are being made about the planet, about the environment. Right now, as a reference before, up in Glasgow, there's some incredible young leaders up there advocating and really up in arms about what's taking place around them. And we at Take 3, we feel very strongly about giving young people the opportunity to have a voice, to be part of the conversation. So education is a big pillar of ours. And that also extends to education within the community and education with business and corporate. So we also, as you mentioned, we do lots of corporate cleanups with different business organisations, which again, it's about educating about the problem and inspiring that business to take action by not only cleaning up the beach at an event, but also changing the culture within their own businesses and seeing change there. The CEO Cleanup is a great new program where CEOs, so business leaders, multinational leaders, come together and again participate in the solution, participate in taking action, and take all of that messaging back to their workplaces, and also, meet other CEOs to kind of build a movement of CEOs that are showing sustainable leadership. So we have a whole suite of programs, but essentially it's kind of raising awareness through education, whether it be individuals, school kids, businesses, community. And we believe, education that inspires participation and education inspires action. So whether it be very small or large within a multinational.
Okay, so I really get it, education and messaging. And I see that messaging, that passion for messaging in your social media, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's inspirational, the quality of the materials that you're putting out. How do you do that?
Well, I'm very pleased for you to say that. We have, believe it or not, right now we have one person in our social media team. We used to have two, and we are recruiting for a new head of communications. But I think the reason, it's extraordinary, the output, for the fact that we only have one person in the team, but the inspiration for that comes from storytelling. So my background is a filmmaker. It's all about storytelling. But it also at Take3, we've always told stories, and I think it's a huge part of what we do is sharing stories, our stories, other people's stories, because I think the visual and emotional storytelling is a really incredibly important way to, again, drive that change. And it's really interesting. Somebody recently did a competitor analysis on looking at Take3 compared to other organisations within Australia that are doing similar things. Now, when Take3 started, there was one or two organisations back in 2009, and now, thankfully, the plastic pollution problem has become a global conversation, and there's now, I think, 24 or so just within Australia. And it's really interesting because there are some really big organisations that speak about all things to do with ocean conservation, and they've got massive revenue streams and massive amount of followers and things like that, and their footprint is national and international. Whereas Take3, we're still a pretty small organisation. Like, there's only 7 full-time people and some volunteers, and yet our social media bubble is way up there with the much bigger organisations.
Right.
And so we have this massive audience of people who really believe in the message, the simplicity of the message. And I think, somebody asked me today, how do I stay positive? Because sometimes when you're working in this space and you're seeing so many human impacts on the environment, and it can become very overwhelming to remain positive. My answer to that was, we have a number of Facebook pages, but one of them is our global Take3 group. And every Saturday morning I'll sit down with my coffee and I'll go through all of the people all around the world, all taking 3 for the sea plus more, and sharing their story and sharing what they've taken. And we've got people in Belgium and Colombia and, just about everywhere, but probably even in Antarctica. And that's what keeps me motivated, keeps me hopeful and optimistic, because I know that there's, hundreds of thousands and millions of people out there who feel the same way I do and want to take action.
Fantastic. I'm hearing a lot of passion, a lot of competence. How did it How did it begin? How did you come to Take Three for the Sea? I understand that you did not found the organisation, but tell us how it all began.
Sure. So, how I came to Take Three was actually back in around 2013, 2014. And my background's actually as a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker, and a lot of my films have been around the ocean, and most recently were to do with ocean conservation. So I'm always watching those type of things. And I've also been a person that if there was one big bee in my bonnet, it's about litter. I can't stand litter. My whole life, if I see litter on the ground or on the beach, I've always picked it up. If somebody's thrown it out of the car, I must admit I have calmly but forcefully given it back to them through their car window. So litter for me has been a big thing.
A thing, yeah, right.
And I saw a film, a short for a film about the North Pacific albatross, and it was up in Midway Island, and it starts off as this beautiful piece where you see these soaring giants, they're magnificent birds, and then as the film goes on, you see their rookery, these amazing islands in Midway. And you get closer and you see that, 100% of the seabird chicks have been impacted by plastic. The images have been seen around the world. They were new to me back then, where you see, lots of dead birds and they're just full of plastic. And,
in what year was that, by the way?
Oh, look, I don't know when the film was released, but for me personally, it was back
Yeah.
around 2013 that I saw this. And, it sounds dramatic, but it's true. I actually dropped to the floor and wept. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. And I was so emotionally moved by what I saw, which is what I've tried to do with my films since, that I I wanted to find an organisation that was doing something about the plastic pollution problem. It was still not really that well known. And in my own local community, I found Take3ForTheSea, and I sought them out and got in contact and offered my services as a volunteer. Said, look, I'm a filmmaker, but I've got a big heart and I work hard, and so whatever you need, this is the hours that I have available. I'd love to get involved in your organisation. And actually back then I was also doing quite a lot in surf lifesaving, and they happened to have a new project that they needed somebody to run called the Take3 Surf Lifesaving Clubs project. So I actually launched that for them and ran it for a few years, and then ended up being on their board because of my producing experience. I had some skills that were helpful, and so I was on the board for a few years. And then I did step down from all of that because I got quite busy in my filmmaking. But I've always loved what Take3 do and been connected to their organisation. So in late 2019, I think that's right, their previous CEO, the amazing Tim Silverwood, who was one of the founders, also was in my film Blue. He decided to move on to his new venture, and I was approached to see if I'd jump ship from my 25-year career and lead the organisation. And I decided to do that. And the reason why I decided to do that was along with making the film Blue, which is a film about it's an ocean conservation film about the impacts on our ocean. We ran a 3-year impact campaign. So we used the film as a tool to raise awareness, but we ran a campaign around that to drive change using the film as a tool. And I was so incredibly, it's a bit of an Australianism here, but blown away by the incredible impact you can have at a grassroots level by telling people what's going on and inspiring them to take action and make change. And we had we reached millions of people around the world with that film, and the data collected was an incredible amount of change. So I loved being a part of that. I loved seeing the results of that, and I knew that's what Take3 was all about. Telling, raising awareness. This is the problem. Let's do something about it. And that's why I said yes. And that was in March of last year, 2020. just before COVID hit, I started in the role. But yeah, I've been connected to Take3 and what they do, for some years now.
I find that fascinating that in 2013 you saw these pictures of these chicks, and then that you said you fell to the floor, and that made such a change to your life that you wanted to take action and do something. I had a similar experience. I had also saw I think it was a French film involving a turtle and a plastic straw, and this does change your perception. And you sound like the perfect person to give some insights into how to create change without, shock videos. I mean, what is the fine line? And just talking about it maybe doesn't make that impact, but actually showing graphic images does. Where does it? What is allowed and what is okay and what is not okay, I suppose.
Yeah, look, I mean, absolutely. I am a huge believer, obviously, because of how I've spent so much of my time in visual storytelling. I've got to say, I could get up and talk to a group of people, a group of children, till I'm blue in the face, and do, a speech about what's going on in the world. And, I can speak. I'm not too bad, but that's pretty boring. A much better way of telling that story is showing the imagery, showing the visual side of the story and telling the narrative underneath that. It's far more effective. A classic example is in the feature film Blue. There's a scene sort of in the middle of the film when we're talking about plastic pollution with a scientist who's in the film, Dr. Jennifer Lavers, and she's out on an island called Lord Howe Island, which is off the east coast of Australia. And again, you see these incredible birds flying, and then you cut to the forest where the birds live, and the chicks are in the nests. And you see a bird that they find, a young chick who's not well, and they know that bird's got a stomach full of plastic, so they regurgitate the bird. And I mean, the amount of plastic that comes out is incredibly confronting. And then later in that story, we see them in the lab, and there's a whole row of poor birds that have died, and Jennifer is investigating the problem and pulls out, this much plastic. Well, people can't see, but it's the equivalent of 250 pieces of plastic she finds in one chick's body. And people always came to me after seeing that in the film Blue and said, now I understand the plastic pollution problem. So they'd heard about it, but until they actually saw that, they didn't really understand it. But more so, it's about that emotional response. So with Blue, we talked about all the impacts on the ocean, and there's a lot, and we had 76 minutes to tell that story. So we didn't have the opportunity, nor was it probably what we wanted to do, to drill down into too much detail. The way that that I feel is the best way to tell stories is to tell an emotionally engaging story. So we didn't do your classic, talking head interviews of a scientist speaking, with great respect. I'm an absolutely huge supporter of science. But we chose characters that have dedicated their life to protecting the ocean, and we followed them in an observational way. And we got to know them just a little bit, and we heard them speak passionately about why they're doing what they're doing. And so, we did show some pretty strong images of the shark markets in Lombok in Indonesia. And you've got your music as well. And people are moved to tears. And we showed, incredible footage of the world's biggest tuna factories in the Philippines. And we showed plastic pollution. So, I would say a good 60 minutes into the film, people are feeling pretty heavy and pretty loaded. And, I always say, we've taken you down to the depths here. And at that point, we needed to make sure we brought the film back up again to that okay, we've taken you on this journey. This is what's going on. But there's something you can do because these people are doing it, and there is hope, and there is actions that we can take. So you do need to get that balance, because if we all just hear and see all the negative things that are going on, and there's no outlet for inspiring that you can make a difference, collectively we can all make a difference if we take these actions, then nothing will change, and it is a hopeless situation. So you need to make sure that you build into that narrative things that we can do, actions that we can take, that if we choose to do these things, like the whole thing that's going on with climate change at the moment, it's pretty full on, but if we do these things collectively, if we make these choices, if we make these changes, we can fix it. And it's really important part of the storytelling to be hopeful and positive, and this is what we can do.
Okay, taking that idea back to Take 3 for the Sea. So Take 3 for the Sea means that you're at the beach, you can pick up three pieces of litter from the beach with you, which is about the smallest act you can do. Mm-hmm. I think it's the minimal viable act, if you like, of taking action. Do you see that as a sort of a gateway to greater things, to larger things?
Yeah, absolutely. So taking 3 for the sea, taking those 3 pieces of litter when you leave the beach, is very much, it is an action, but it's very much, and more importantly, a conversation starter. So it's very much about promoting what you do and why you do it, if you choose to take that action, sharing your story. But it's also a gateway, as you say, to having conversations about how we have to stop litter getting there in the first place. So litter reduction, waste management, a circular economy, turning it off on the tap. There is, to tackle this problem, this crisis that we're facing, and not just in our oceans. I mean, plastic is a global crisis, land and sea. There are all of these things that we need to be doing. So our message, it's a very simple message and a very simple action. But by using that, we have access to people to have the conversation, to raise awareness about the extent of the problem and all the different pieces of the puzzle that need to be moved around and looked at in order to solve the problem. And so that's why, for us, we have a simple message, but it gives us access to working with business, small and medium and large. And we then go on this journey with businesses, a sustainable journey of change. So how we can work with them to stop using virgin plastics. Like, we can't get rid of plastic, but we can certainly work with big plastic users in their packaging to stop using virgin plastics, to promote circular economy where they can reuse and recycle and repurpose and keep it going around. And so, it's about having that we're accessible because of the simplicity of our message, but that then gives us the opportunity to grow those conversations in a far greater capacity.
Okay, talking about growth, you're already in other countries. Do you see yourself as expanding, or what are the future plans?
Sure. So my vision for Take3's future is we are, yes, followed in 129 countries and counting, but that's very much really, I guess, almost a social media type of following. So we are engaging, we have an engaged audience in that many countries that are taking 3 for the sea. What I'm very passionate and what my vision for is to actually turn that audience into real action on ground, and the kind of actions that you and I have been talking about, so that we have a more substantial footprint where we can actually see those actions being taken nationally, multinationally, within my immediate region, which is in the Asia Pacific region. And I very much see us as global leaders in education. So that's, one of the things you spoke about prior to us starting the session was what can be our point of difference. There's a lot of organisations out there doing similar things to Take3, but one of the things that Take3 does really well and has been doing for a long time and is very passionate about is our education programs, particularly in the classic sense of I mean, education is a very broad word. We work education with corporates, etc. But I mean in the classic sense of working with young people, educating young people. And that's something that our vision is to grow that to be the global leaders in this space, and developing more and more programs and making them more and more accessible to kids all around the world. The other area of growth for us is a lot of the work of ocean conservation groups in general is done on the coast for obvious reasons. But we're really, one of our key messages is that we're all...
doesn't start at the coast.
Yeah, and one of our key messages is that we're all connected to the ocean. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether you're a coastal dweller or an inland dweller or a mountain dweller, we're all connected to the ocean, and we're all dependent on a healthy ocean. Because the ocean, as we know, and most people know, is the greatest life support system of our planet. We talk about it being planet ocean rather than planet Earth because over 70% of the planet is covered by ocean. It drives our climate, it drives our weather, it produces more than 50% of the oxygen we breathe, it absorbs the carbon. It is an incredibly vital, it is the most vital life force of our planet. So everyone, everywhere is connected to the planet, like Sylvia Earle will always say. And so we're all dependent on it being a healthy, sustainable ocean. So my vision for Take3 and our vision at Take3 is to take our message upstream. So we have a new program called Saltwater to Freshwater, taking Take3 upstream. The storytelling is the story will be told by Indigenous peoples in Australia, and as we roll this out in other countries as well. And all around that connection piece, taking care of country. And of course in Australia we have saltwater people and freshwater people with our Indigenous Australians. So it's taking that message upstream. As we know, the rivers are also the arteries that deliver that plastic pollution to the oceans. So it's working a lot more with rural and remote communities, particularly those based around river systems. So moving inland, as well as globally in terms of our education programs.
Okay, Sarah, that's a really inspiring story. What I'm taking with me is, that taking action is the first step after awareness, and then taking greater action will release us from this cycle of powerlessness. And sort of ultimately it's about a positive, optimistic story, message that'll take us forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for me, the most important takeaway message is that all of us individually have incredible power. Even as consumers, we have incredible power by the choices that we make to drive change. And so never underestimate your power as an individual. Even the smallest actions, because it's a collective thing that we all do have the power to make a difference, do have the power to drive change, and to feel really good about that. I mean, it can sound fluffy and simple, but it actually isn't. And I know it's not, because I've seen the collective impact that an organisation like Take3 can have just by inspiring people to take action. And that could be the CEO of a multinational that is now completely changing the supply chain of their business, to the kids in a particular school who now have waste mitigation in their schools. Never underestimate your power as an individual to do good and help this planet recover.
Sarah, thanks for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me, Peter.